Have you ever wondered, what would be the very first thing to cross your mind if you knew you had exactly 1 minute left to live? My name is Ethan Rowe. I'm 58 years old, senior resident physician at St. Luke Medical Center in Missouri, and also a man who just died at 3:14 a.m., right in the emergency room, the very place where I had once saved hundreds of lives. Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But in that moment, I didn't feel anything dramatic at all. There was no blinding light, no voice from heaven, no celestial music. There was only complete silence, and a question that drilled straight into my chest like a blade. Why did I live a life I wouldn't even bother remembering? In that moment, I left my body. I saw myself pale-faced, eyes wide open, unconscious. And then I saw Mrs. Margaret. She was the last patient I had cared for before my shift ended. 84 years old. Terminal cancer. Cloudy eyes. Wrinkled hands trembling as she held mine tight. "Dr. Rowe, if I don't wake up tomorrow morning, will you remember me?" I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. I gently pulled my hand away and walked out of the room as if it were just the next task on my checklist. I thought I was good at hiding emotion. And I was. For 12 years, ever since the day my wife died. Anna, the only woman who ever made me believe in life more than I believed in medicine. A car accident on her way to work. Simple. Sudden. Final. She was gone and left me with a shell labeled husband, but hollow inside. I didn't cry. No one saw me fall apart. Because I didn't let myself feel anything anymore. I became the perfect medical machine. No mistakes. No emotions. No belief in anything. People called me the hero of the night because I worked the most night shifts. But the truth is, I didn't stay for the patients. I stayed because I was afraid to go home to a house where no one was waiting for me. That night was no different. I took a sip of cold coffee, signed off the end of shift form in a rush. No one knew I had just administered the wrong medication during a severe anaphylactic emergency. And no one knew I would be the next one needing emergency care. My chest felt like the entire room was pressing down on it. I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb. And then, everything went black. I died at 3:14 a.m. No one noticed for the next 4 minutes. And in those 4 minutes, I watched my entire life replay like a tape on fast forward, but one I couldn't rewind. There were no birthday parties, no vacations, no whispered, "I love you," only alarm bells, sleepless night shifts, clinical decisions without emotion, and the faces of patients whose names I could no longer remember. Then a voice spoke not from outside but from the deepest place within me. "Ethan, you've healed hundreds of bodies. But who has healed you?" I wanted to answer, but I had no mouth. Only a hollow ache, spiraling inward like a black hole. Maybe you're asking yourself, I'm just an ordinary person, not a doctor, so what does this have to do with me? I used to think the same thing when I heard stories like this, until I was the one lying motionless under those harsh fluorescent lights. And for the first time in 30 years of practicing medicine, I realized this. There's something even more terrifying than death, living without ever knowing why you're alive. Have you ever felt like you were existing, but not present? Have you ever lain down at night and wondered, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, would anyone notice I was gone? If so, then maybe you and I, though different in profession, are the same in this one painful truth. We've slowly started losing ourselves. And that, it was just the beginning. I haven't told you what happened next, the strange light, the memories I never knew I had, the person I thought I'd never see again. Yes, I died, but I also met someone I believed was gone forever. And what she said changed everything. It might just change you too. Do you want to know what I saw on the other side of that door? I'll tell you. But first, let me ask you something. Did you know you can breathe, talk, work, and still be dying a little more each day? I was never afraid of death. I'd seen it too many times. It doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It just quietly steps out of the room and never returns. I didn't go on Facebook. Didn't reply to my younger brother, who had messaged me 17 times with the same question. "Are you okay?" And then I started going numb, even with my patients. I still treated them. Right protocol. Right timing. The right procedures. But I could no longer remember who lived and who didn't. I avoided asking their names. Avoided looking them in the eye. Avoided making promises. Don't let emotions interfere with your work, I told myself. But the truth was I was afraid. Afraid that if I allowed myself to hurt over one patient, I'd shatter for the hundreds that came after. There was a time I left a 9-year-old boy crying alone in the ICU waiting room for 30 minutes. Beck, I used to think being a doctor meant learning how to get used to goodbyes. But I was wrong. I didn't die at 3:14 a.m. No. I started dying in 2012. The year Anna, my wife, was taken from me on a misty, gray morning. Her car skidded, hit the guardrail. The airbag deployed too late. She was gone before the ambulance ever arrived. Just 6 minutes. That's all it took. But I lost the rest of my life. After the funeral, I didn't take time off. I went back on shift the very next night. No one questioned it. People admired me for it. Ethan's so strong. Lost his wife, but never lost focus. A true doctor always puts the patients first. No one knew. I stayed at the hospital because I couldn't bear the sound of the empty garage door opening. Because I couldn't stand the sight of Anna's nightgown still hanging in the bathroom, still smelling faintly of fabric softener. I started picking up double shifts, then triple. At one point, I worked 31 shifts in a single month. They called it dedication. I called it an organized escape. At first, I told myself, I was just throwing myself into work to forget the pain. But slowly, I forgot how to feel anything at all. No sadness, no joy, no anger, no love. I became an emotional thermostat, cold enough to function, but not so cold that anyone would notice. One night, Clara, the nurse who'd worked beside me for 5 years, looked at me and asked, "Ethan, have you ever thought about opening up again? To someone? To anything?" I smiled, shook my head, and said, "If I open up, who's going to stitch me back together?" I was afraid, not of love, but of losing again. I had lost my wife without doing anything wrong. And since then, I have lived by one rule. If nothing touches your heart, then nothing can break it. I stopped making new friends. Stopped going back home. Skipped weddings, birthdays, and Christmas. Oz I couldn't bring myself to walk in. His father was in a coma, critical. His mother had already passed away. He sat on a chair, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, eyes wet and silent. I walked right past him. Didn't stop. Didn't say a word. That night, I couldn't sleep. But the next day, I went back to work. And a few weeks later, I forgot that boy's name. There is a kind of death quieter than a stopped heartbeat. It's when you can no longer remember who you once loved, who you were once grateful for, who once made you cry. What have you ever wanted to live for? The only thing I held on to, all these years, was a wedding ring I never wore. I kept it in the left pocket of my lab coat, right next to my heart. No one ever saw it. No one ever knew. I never spoke about it. But sometimes, each time my hand reached for a syringe, I felt a slight tug on the pocket of my coat, as if someone was still holding on to me in silence. I used to think I was okay again, until that night, a night shift like so many others, until I saw a patient convulsing, gasping, lips turning blue. I reached for the meds. I gave the injection. But I was wrong. More precisely, I overdosed on the medication. Because I was distracted. Because I was exhausted. Because I told myself, it's probably right. I'm Ethan Rowe, an emergency physician for over 30 years. And I gave the wrong medication. No one noticed, until I collapsed from anaphylactic shock caused by that very same drug. Minutes later, I was the one being called in for code blue. Minutes later, I became the nameless patient. And the most bitter truth was this: no one knew I was dying. Because I had spent so long living as if I didn't exist. I thought I had forgotten what it meant to feel. But on the other side, I felt everything. Raw, unfiltered, and impossible to hide. Because what was waiting for me wasn't heaven, but the truth of who I was, played back in every detail. Would you dare look back at your life, through the eyes of God Himself? The next part, it was where I faced what I feared most: memory. You think you know who you are until you see yourself, from outside your body. I don't remember the moment I collapsed. There was no slowing heartbeat. No disorientation like in the movies. Just emptiness. And then suddenly I was standing in the ER, looking down at my own body. Lying there. Still. Eyes still open. My white lab coat was still pristine, but my face pale, bluish, frozen like a lifeless mask. I knew it was me. But I didn't feel connected to it. It was like looking at an old photograph of yourself as a teenager, and all you can say is, I look like a stranger. I saw the nurses rush in. One was on the phone. Another is injecting adrenaline. Another is working on the resuscitation bag. A young doctor shouted, "He gave the wrong dose. It's an acute anaphylactic shock." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel shame. I just felt weightless. No skin. No gravity. I drifted upward toward the ceiling, as if someone was pulling me by an invisible thread. And I saw everything, but in a strange new way. I didn't just see the people in the room. I could feel what they were feeling. Clara, the senior nurse, was checking my pulse. Her hands were trembling, though her voice barked orders as usual. But inside, she was spiraling with panic, mixed with guilt. Andrew, the medical intern whom I had harshly reprimanded just weeks ago, was attaching electrodes, thinking, how could it be him? He's the one who never makes mistakes. And then, I saw something no one else could see. I saw Anna, my wife. She didn't come through a glowing doorway. She didn't descend from any staircase in heaven. She was just there, standing quietly in the corner of the room, under the soft glow of a flickering light. She was wearing that old floral dress. And smiling, I thought I had forgotten. I'm still here, Ethan. She said. I never left. But you left yourself a long time ago. I broke down in tears. Not because I saw her again, but because for a fleeting moment, I remembered what it felt like to feel. And in that very moment, the room began to fade. The light around me shattered into particles of soft white dust. Then, everything was swallowed by a darkness so absolute it had no color, no sound, no time. I floated in a space of nothingness, and yet it felt as heavy as if I were carrying the weight of my entire life on my back. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how long I had been there. I couldn't feel my body, but I was still conscious. And then a question echoed not from any one direction, but from everywhere at once. Ethan Rowe, you've lived many years, but how many days did you truly live? I tried to answer, but I had no mouth. Only memory erupting like lightning flashes. Scene by scene, moment by moment. Mistake after mistake appeared without warning, beyond my control. I saw. Margaret's face was the elderly woman who asked if I would remember her. The teary eyes of the little girl waiting for her father to wake up, the one I had walked past. The empty room where Anna used to sit waiting for me to come home every night. I was no longer Dr. Ethan. I was a man watching his life through a light that could not lie. I didn't die. I was being taught how to live again. And then, a doorway appeared. Not a wooden door. Not a golden gate to heaven. Just a tear in the light, quiet, waiting. I knew if I passed through it, it would take me to what's next. Maybe heaven. Maybe something even more permanent than death. I moved closer. And then that voice, deep, vast, and filled with power, spoke once more. Wait. You're not finished yet. I turned back. And for the first time, I saw God not as a person, not with a face, but as a presence that enveloped everything. No words were needed. I understood. No language was spoken. I felt. You lived to heal others. But you never healed yourself. Go back. Begin again, not with others, but with your own heart. I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay here, where Anna was, where there were no mistakes, no pressure, no endless monitor beeps. But I knew the choice wasn't mine anymore. Because once you've truly seen yourself, you can't return the same. I thought I would be allowed to rest. But instead, I was given a chance. A second life, not just to exist, but to truly live. And when I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the face of the one person who used to resent me the most, crying. If you were shown your entire life, would you be brave enough not to look away? I thought I knew who I was. I had a clean medical record, a degree, a reputation, hundreds of lives saved. I thought I was a good man, until I was forced to look at myself through eyes that could not be deceived, the eyes of God. There was no chair, no panel of judgment, just me, standing alone in an invisible space facing a light, gentle, but sharper than any blade, truth. And then a voice not from outside, but from within my very awareness spoke. You lived, but what did you leave behind in the hearts of others? I was about to speak about my achievements, about emergency cases, about long overnight shifts. But before I could even open my mouth, a reel of memory unfolded not through my eyes, but through feeling. I didn't just see. I became every person I had ever touched. I was Margaret, the elderly woman who asked if I'd remember her. I felt my heart break. When I watched myself turn away, I felt what it was like to face the final night of my life with no one holding my hand. No one whispers, "You are not invisible." I was the young nurse in turn, trembling as she tried to explain a mistake to me. I felt myself shrink under the weight of my cold voice. I saw her cry alone in the restroom that night and come dangerously close to giving up her career. I was the little boy waiting in the ICU for his father to wake up. I saw the doctor's shoes walk by, My shoes are without stopping. I waited for 3 hours, then fell asleep on a fragile hope that had barely begun to form. Grown-ups will come when I need them. I thought I was the one who saved lives. But now, I see I was also someone who broke people, not out of cruelty, but because I had gone numb. Not because I meant harm, but because I no longer dared to let my heart stay soft. I wept not out of regret, but because I finally allowed myself to feel again. And then, the voice returned gently, but without pity. I'm not asking what you did well. I'm asking, how many people felt loved because you touched their lives? In that moment, I finally understood the very thing I had spent my whole life avoiding. No one needs a perfect doctor. They need a human being who dares to be real. I looked up toward God, though there was no form, no face, but somehow I knew He saw all of me. And still I was not judged. I was not punished. I was simply shown the truth in a way that could no longer be denied. His voice grew closer. Ethan, you lived as if no one could ever hurt you. But you also never let anyone truly touch you. My throat tightened. I thought of Anna. I remembered all the times she texted, "Don't stay too late, okay?" And I always replied, "On call. Go to bed without me." I remembered the last time she called me, and I was in a meeting. I declined the call and sent just one word back. Busy. The last word I ever sent to the woman I loved most. Then his voice slow, steady, and full of knowing. "You are not punished for that," he said. "But you must understand. Every choice leaves a mark either in someone else's heart or in the quiet ache of your regret." I whispered not with words, but with a trembling thought. "Can I begin again?" Silence. And then, the light around me began to fold in on itself, as if time were reversing. I felt myself being pulled backward, drawn through the very memories I had just relived. Back toward the hospital room, the place where I had died at 3:14 a.m. And then the voice, soft as breath, yet echoing through the depths of my soul, said, "You weren't brought back to life. You were given life for the first time." I thought my story had ended. But it turns out, that was just the beginning of a life truly lived. And when I opened my eyes, the last person I ever expected to cry for me was holding my hand tightly. Do you want to know what happens when someone comes back from the dead and chooses to live differently? Wait for the next part. Because not everyone who comes back truly changes. But everyone who truly changes has only just begun to live. I opened my eyes. There was no blinding light. No angelic choir. Just the dim, yellowish glow of the ICU ceiling, cold, muted, and real. Before I could even move, I felt someone gripping my hand tightly. It was Andrew, the young doctor I had scolded just a few weeks before. His eyes were red. His voice cracked as he said, "You came back, I thought. I'd lost you." In that moment, I didn't know what to say. I, the one who had once dismissed him, the one who had brushed off his fears, was now seeing something I hadn't seen in anyone for years: sincerity. I couldn't recall everything right away. But the feeling that I was no longer the same person was so clear, it frightened me. And I began to cry right there in the ICU. Not because of pain, but because, for the first time in years, my tears didn't need a reason to fall. 3 weeks later, I was discharged. But not to return to my laptop, or the shift schedule, or a stack of patient files. I came home with a new list handwritten in blue ink, scribbled in the recovery room. TODO list. Things TO do while I still have the chance: write letters of apology to every person I've ever hurt, whether they're still alive or not. Call my brother back and listen. Look at Anna's photo again and stop running from it. Care for one patient each day, not out of duty, but out of humanity. Say thank you. To anyone. Even for the smallest things. Live slowly. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to laugh. But live truthfully. On my first day back at the hospital, I left my wristwatch on the desk. I didn't want to work by the hour anymore. I wanted to work by the rhythm of the heart. I began to look into my patients' eyes. I listened to their fears, not just their symptoms. I held their families, even the ones I had never met before. And for the first time in my life, I said, "I'm not sure I can heal your body, but I promise your soul won't be alone." Clara, the nurse who had worked by my side for years, looked at me and asked, "Ethan, what happened to you?" I smiled. No deflection. No distance. And I told her the truth. I died, Clara. And I didn't come back just to keep living. I came back to start living the right way. 1 month later, I received a handwritten letter. No return address. No name. Just a single line. "Thank you for staying with us." As I folded the letter, I realized I had become something I had long forgotten how to be: a human being. Anna is gone, but I feel her every time I do something kind. When I brush the hair of a child without parents. When I sit quietly by the bedside of a dying patient, saying nothing, just being there. I don't run from pain anymore. I hold it as part of what it means to truly live. Each morning, I place my wedding ring on the table and look at it as a quiet reminder. To love is to still be there even when we no longer are. And I came to understand one simple truth. None of us has to die to change. We just have to be willing to look back and begin again. I didn't come back to say I saw God. I came back to ask you, are you truly living or just existing? And if you're ready, in the final part, I'll share with you, the one message God truly wanted me to bring back for you is a message that just might change the way you see your entire life. Because coming back to life isn't about doing something grand. It's about finally choosing to do the small things you once overlooked. I started over with the ordinary. The very ordinary. I made my coffee in the morning, not the usual double-shot espresso, but a simple black cup sipped slowly. I took walks around the neighborhood, and for the first time I noticed the trees had started blooming, and I hadn't even realized when. I stopped, ran my hand along the rough bark of one tree and thought, it's been standing here, waiting for me to finally see it. Just like life, it's always been there. I just never stopped long enough to truly feel it. That afternoon, I came home early, something I hadn't done in 12 years. I cooked dinner myself and set out 3 sets of plates and chopsticks. One for me, one for Anna, and one for the child we never got to have. I didn't think I was crazy. I just wanted the meal to have a soul. That night, I opened my phone and searched for the name Benjamin Rowe, my younger brother. He had sent me 17 messages over the past 4 years, all circling the same question. Are you okay? Sending you a photo of Mom and Dad. Will you be home for Christmas this year? I miss you. I had never replied to a single one. I tapped call. My heart pounded like a child about to dial their father after breaking the rules. He picked up almost instantly. A shaky, startled hello. Then silence. Then a choked sob. Ethan? Is that you? I gripped the phone. My throat tightened, and I finally said the words I had held in for far too long. I'm sorry, I lived like no one needed me. And I was wrong. Thank you for never stopping waiting. We talked for hours. No agenda. No problem to solve. Just 2 brothers, for the first time in over a decade, hearing each other breathe without blame, without walls. Benjamin shared, Mom passed away last year. I didn't know. He got married. Had a daughter. Named her Anna. I didn't know that either. Every year, he sent me Christmas cards. All of them are still sitting in a drawer. I'm not angry at you, Ethan. I'm just sad that I wasn't enough of a reason for you to come back. And I wept. Not from pain, but because I finally understood that there were people who had loved me unconditionally through all the years I had disappeared. Since that day, every morning I FaceTime my niece, little Anna. She always starts with the same question. Uncle Ethan, are you still alive today? I laugh. I'm truly alive. And happy too. But now, everything I do carries the awareness of someone granted extra time. I water the plants and greet them as if they can hear me. I say thank you to the mail carrier. I place my hand over my chest every time a patient reaches for mine as a silent promise. I'm here. Fully. Completely. I didn't become a spiritual guru. I didn't go on podcasts to tell a miraculous story. I just lived lighter. Deeper. More real. I used to think that coming back to life was the greatest miracle. But now I know living truthfully is the greatest miracle of all. And in the final part, I'll share with you the most important thing God ever whispered to me. A truth so simple that if you truly understand it, you will never live the same way again. There's no journey longer than the one that leads you back to your own family. 3 months after I was discharged, I did the one thing I had avoided for 12 years. I went home. Not to the apartment where I had lived alone for so long, but to home, the place where Benjamin and I grew up, where my mother used to sit by the window, embroidering handkerchiefs and calling me her stubborn but tender-hearted firstborn. I returned on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The sky was a soft, waiting blue, as if the world itself had been holding its breath. Benjamin opened the door. No hugs, no tears. He simply placed a hand on my shoulder and said, Mom always kept a seat for you at the table. I choked up. Mom was gone. But they had still saved a place for me. A wooden chair, its back slightly tilted, was set by the window where sunlight streamed in at an angle. Little Anna came running. No hesitation. No awkwardness. She wrapped her arms around my legs, as if I had always been a part of her childhood. I saved your bed, Uncle. There's a stuffed animal on it. I laughed for the first time, like someone truly alive. That dinner wasn't anything special. Roast meat, vegetable soup, and cornbread just like Mom used to make. But every bite I took melted into memory. Mom's playful scolding. Ethan, don't go for the crispiest piece first. Benjamin's laughter, mouth full of cornbread, singing Christmas songs in the middle of summer. The creak of the old wooden chair was a sound I used to hate, now suddenly felt so heartbreakingly familiar. Benjamin poured me a small glass of wine, Mom's favorite kind. We'll go visit her tomorrow morning. She'd be so happy to see you're not running anymore. I nodded. Didn't say a word. Because if I did, I might break. The next morning the sky was blue. No wind. Mom's grave lay beneath an old maple tree. Its leaves had just begun to turn gold. I stood in silence. No prayers. No speeches. I simply laid a white chrysanthemum on her grave and sat down on the earth like the little boy I once was. I'm sorry. For missing Mom last year. For not being there for Benjamin. For thinking my pain was the only one that mattered, and forgetting that everyone else was hurting too. A soft breeze brushed across my face. Not cold. Not harsh. But like an old, gentle hand full of grace resting on my forehead and saying, "It's okay, child. As long as you've come back." Benjamin stood behind me, silent. Not interrupting. When I turned to face him, he smiled at the light as he exhaled. "Mom's already forgiven you. Now maybe, it's time you forgive yourself." I bowed my head. For the first time, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. I used to think losing someone you love meant losing everything. But now I know, as long as you choose to come back, they were never truly gone. And now, I'm ready to share with you the final thing, God's whisper. Just one sentence, that changed forever the way I face this life. Because there are some questions that, once you dare to answer them truthfully, you will never live the same way again. It's been 6 months since I died, and I'm still not sure what to call this time. A resurrection? A rebirth? Or maybe living honestly for the very first time. I didn't write a book. Didn't start a Back from the Dead seminar. I just live each day as if waking up in the morning is a gift I'm far too undeserving of. I don't wear a watch anymore. I measure time by the hugs. The quiet mornings sipping coffee by the window with Benjamin. The moments my niece, little Anna, calls out Uncle Ethan and proudly shows me she's lost another tooth. The times I hold a patient's hand and say, "I'm here," not as a doctor, but as a human being. And every night, before I fall asleep, I write down one line. Just one. Not long. Not for anyone else to read. Just to remind myself, did I live truthfully today? I know you don't need a near-death experience like mine to change. You don't have to die just to learn how to be grateful for the simple act of breathing. You only need to pause and ask yourself one question. Am I truly living, or just repeating? Because death itself isn't the scariest thing. What's far more terrifying is spending a lifetime without a single moment that truly made your heart tremble. And this was what God whispered to me at the very end, just before I returned. I did not give you more time. I gave you more awareness. Use it for yourself and for those still lost. And if you were to ask me, after everything, what is truly worth coming back for? I would say, not money, not fame, not anything you can take with you when you leave this world. But this, a forgiveness you never found the courage to offer. A hug you kept saying, maybe tomorrow. Someone who's still waiting for you to come home. Even after all this time you've been lost. I didn't come back to prove God exists. I came back to ask you one question. If tomorrow never comes, what would you regret the most? And can you do that one thing today? I died at 3:14 a.m. But the truth is, the first time I lived was the moment I realized, no one lives forever, but anyone can live with meaning if they're brave enough to begin. I died at 3:14 a.m. But the scariest thing wasn't death. It was living without knowing why you're alive. What are you still waiting for to finally change? If you're still here, then maybe something in this story has reached something in you. And if you've ever been through something similar, a loss, an awakening, a moment when you died inside and came back to life, leave a comment below. Because maybe your story will be the light for someone else still lost in the dark, like I once was. And if you want to keep walking alongside stories that touch the deepest parts of what it means to be human, hit follow. Not to watch more videos, but to make sure you don't miss yourself on the journey back to living truthfully.